Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we are talking transfer portal madness, as well as a little bit of basketball and maybe some national college football stuff, because the season is not quite over for everyone, even though it is for South Carolina. I guess the best way to start here, because we usually start with recruiting anyway, is to kind of talk a little bit about who in the portal is coming this weekend. So there were some initial reports that the Miami running back, who is a South Carolina legacy, man, I can't think of his name right now. Something Donald Staley or something. No, it wasn't Staley, but anyway, last I heard, he has some injury concerns, so it's possible that he's not even going to make that visit, or I don't know. South Carolina's kind of backing off. We'll talk about who they could target at running back. We're also hearing that the likelihood of Mario Anderson returning is pretty good, but we'll see if he decides that he wants to take a shot at the NFL draft, which I personally think would be a bad idea. But last we've heard, he's, kind of getting some good intel to come back. As far as other visits scheduled this weekend, we've heard of Louisiana Tech wide receiver Cyrus Allen and Southern Miss offensive lineman Gerquin Scott. Both of those are on our Insiders Forum on the football transfer portal tracker thread. And then we also have a players leaving thread, which we'll get into real quickly. But pretty much everything that has happened up to this point has been populated each day on that thread. So that's a good resource if you are a little behind on all this transfer portal stuff.
Offers out there. Over a dozen offers for South Carolina football this week. Jaden McGowan's another one we haven't talked about yet, but he's a Lawrence, South Carolina kid, former Vanderbilt receiver, attended a camp in South Carolina during the summer of Shane Beamer's first year. Got an offer out to him. Will Shepard is going to have a lot of interest. The Vanderbilt receiver got an offer to him. Those are two more in the wide receiver group to keep track of.
Yeah, and as far as people to really start paying attention to quickly, Jaden McGowan, as you mentioned, also is supposed to visit, I believe, this weekend. Mm-hmm. And then Tennessee Tech transfer safety Gerald Kilgore, which is the brother of Jalen Kilgore, is supposed to be coming in this weekend as well. I could see things moving pretty quickly with both those guys, should everything check out the right way. And then another one that I think is supposed to be in this weekend, I'm trying to get confirmation, is the Harvard tight end Tyler Neville, which is another one that things could move sort of quickly on. There's some bigger names that may excite fans more, but I think all three of those guys are certainly bring an element to the potential 2024 squad and fill some holes that are necessary. So let's talk about players leaving real quick, and then we can talk about some of these other names in the portal. You mentioned the other Vandy wide receiver, Will Shepard, who is a very elite wide receiver. He's got offers from pretty much everywhere at this point. Running back Rocket Sanders obviously has a connection with Dowell Loggins out of Arkansas. He's going to have offers from all over. So some of those will go a little bit longer than some of these, I guess, smaller name schools that South Carolina has been uncovering, or things that have natural connections, like the kid from Lawrence, like you said. All right, the biggest loss, I guess there are two names that come up so far in the portal, are Antoine Wells Jr., who we talked a little bit about last week, and Mitch Jeter, which was probably a little bit of a surprise to some. From my understanding, I don't think he's signed anywhere yet, but my understanding is there's some connection there to Alabama. We've heard some connections on Antoine Wells to Texas, although I think he's taking some other visits as well. I guess reaction on the holes that those two guys leave, whether or not it makes sense for them to leave, I don't know.
I think both cases, those are clearly your two biggest losses so far. Those are your two players who were starting in those roles this year. Well, Wells not as much after he got hurt, obviously, but in 2022, we know what Juice Wells is. We know what he can do. I think you also feel like you can design an offense without him, design an offense in a way where maybe you don't need him. Obviously, it would have helped to have him, but offense passing game wasn't the issue for most of last season, even after he got hurt. Now, granted, you were counting on a 1,000-yard receiver in Leggett, who you're not going to have next year, so someone's going to have to step into that role. But I think you can make it work without him. It just makes it tougher, and it really brings into focus guys like Elijah Caldwell, CJ Adams, players like that. Really, you're going to need Tyshawn Russell. You're going to need to take a jump next year. And also,
Harbor.
of course, Nick Harbor. Yeah. Yep, of course, you're portaling pretty heavy right now, trying to get some receivers. That's been a clear position of focus for Beamer, Justin Stepp, and the whole staff. As for Jeter, it's kind of a weird one. You don't really think about losing your kicker in the portal. But you do have Alex Herrera still, who's coming back for his 6th year next year. And you have Mason Love coming into this class. And obviously, kicker is one of those positions where, if he can make the kicks, he can make the kicks. Whether you're a freshman or a senior, it's not a physicality thing. It's not a line of scrimmage thing. So I think you feel okay about your options at kicker. You just don't want to lose Jeter. You can still make that work.
Wow. Also, just breaking news here, Mario Anderson Jr. just reposted something from On3, actually, which I know they're a competitor or whatever. That we can take this as confirmation, since Mario Anderson Jr. himself reposted it, that he plans to enter the transfer portal. So literally live right after I said that about the draft. So yeah, there is no one in the running back room except for Juju McDowell now for South Carolina. Like you said, the wide receiver
DJ
room.
Braswell.
And DJ Braswell, yeah. And like you said, the wide receiver room is obviously pretty empty. So those are two positions that they're definitely going to have to make some splashes in the portal on. Now, when you look at it from the other angle, Spencer Rattler moving to the NFL, Juice Wells going into the portal, which it was reported he was one of the highest paid SEC wide receivers in NIL last year or whatever. So you would think that there's some NIL money to go around now, that probably your two biggest paid guys are moving on. So maybe that's going to help in this portal period. We'll have to see how all of that plays out. I guess when we look at some other names that were rumored earlier on, we've started to get some confirmation of somewhat confirmation of several guys getting back. If you go to the Garnet Trust Twitter, which again, they're affiliated with a competitor, Gamecock Central, but it's an NIL program. It's the official NIL program of the University of South Carolina. We don't have an NIL program, so go contribute to the Garnet Trust if you want to. Anyway, Garnet Trust has confirmed they've re-signed TJ Sanders, Jalen Kilgore, Alex Huntley, Tonka Hemingway, Tria Babalade, Luke Doty,
Bam Martin
Scott, and Josh Simon. I think that's pretty much the full list right now. Yeah. So those are a couple of names that obviously are pretty crucial, and some of which had been rumored to be looking elsewhere prior to the portal opening up, but it sounds like deals got worked out with pretty much everyone there. Other names, I guess, to kind of keep on your radar as fearful. Obviously, the Mario Anderson Jr. thing just happened. O'Donnell Fortune, we've heard some stuff on. There might be some other reserves, I guess, that look around. But as far as like impact starters, I think it sounds like the core should return in a way that maybe didn't happen in the 2023 cycle. And now, yeah, you just got to go out there and bust your butt recruiting in the portal to fill in those gaps that obviously have opened up. And this is the reality of college football now. This is every team is facing this, and the ones that navigate it the best are the ones that are going to rise to the top.
I think when you just take the conversation we had a second ago with your biggest portal losses, okay, Wells, Anderson, which literally just happened, Jeter. All right, that's two offense and a special teams. You have lost players on defense. We can go through a whole list in a second, but obviously you still could lose OD Fortune, like you said. But your defense is intact portal-wise. Marcellus Styles is going to go to the NFL draft. You're going to have to make a replacement there. You're losing Jordan Strawn because he's finally out of eligibility. But your defense is still what you thought it was going to be before the portal opened, I guess, if you want to put it that way. In terms of next year, you've got that kind of three-headed monster of Kilgore, Eamon, and Smith back there. We'll see about corner, but linebacker, Debo, Stone, Bam, Pup, that's intact. Defensive tackle, intact, Tonka, Boogie, TJ, those were your three. I still think you could probably deal with another edge rusher, or again, you're going to get a guy like Desmond Umeozulu to take a step, freshman to sophomore. But
Dylan Stewart
to
make an immediate impact,
right? It's there. It's kind of what you thought you had is still there on defense, and then again, it's December 6th. We're on day 3 of a 45-day portal window, but right now that's about as good as you can hope for in modern college football, I think.
Yeah, and obviously with the caveat that there is 43 days left for weird stuff to go down. We don't have any specific instances of tampering or anything that we can talk about, but there's no doubt that there are people that maybe didn't think about the portal that are getting back channel sort of conversations about what they could be earning elsewhere. So those things are going to happen. I do think you feel at the moment somewhat cautiously optimistic that, yeah, your core is back. We also expect some coaching changes to come in the next couple of weeks. Not going to get into specifics on that, although I think you can read between the lines somewhat on departures and stuff, and that gives you at least a little bit of a guess. But we'll see how that all plays out. That it's kind of weird this time of year, right? Because you're trying to wrap up the early recruiting cycle, which they sign in like 2 weeks. You're trying to
from today is signing day.
Yeah, and then you are trying to make an impact in the portal, and you're trying to make sure that your coaching staff is the strongest it can be without losing any of the relationships that you've made. It's a really delicate balance. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Let's go through real quick. And again, I'm pulling this from the Insiders Forum where we have our players leaving tab. Some other names that you might recognize as a Gamecock fan, although most of them weren't making the sort of impact that the names we've already mentioned were. But Donovan Westmoreland is expected in the portal. There's a bunch of other names of people. Yeah, Tanner Bailey and Colton Gauthier. We kind of talked all season that eventually something was going to have to give in the quarterback room. So 2 defections there. Obviously, Rattler moves to the NFL. So now you got Lenora Sellers, Luke Doty and Dante Reno who are coming in. It wouldn't surprise me if they pick up someone in the portal. I know that they were linked a little bit to KJ Jefferson. That might surprise me because I do think that they sort of project Sellers as the starter right now. Maybe you bring in a guy like Jefferson who has a relationship with Loggins, has a similar playing style to what we expect Sellers to do, and then kind of like use that as a mentor-mentee relationship if Sellers is open to it. But I don't know. Can you even guarantee that Jefferson would start over Sellers at this point?
I mean, you have to want them. They have to want you. It has to actually fit. I think that's the main thing with portal stuff this time of year. It's easy to see a name go in and draw a straight line from A to B and think he would fit here, but that has to be a two-way street where the player wants to come, the player knows they're going to play, and also you can give the player what they need and you want them.
Well, and you aren't ruining the relationship with the very talented quarterback you already have on the roster as well. Because if Sellers wants to start this year and then you bring in assumed starter over him or whatever, perhaps
you wouldn't be bringing in. You wouldn't be bringing in KJ Jefferson to sit.
Right. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to find like a backup quality quarterback just to fill out that room. But again, that's kind of a hard proposition because most quarterbacks that are going into the portal probably came from a role where they weren't getting the sort of playing time that they wanted. So they're looking for a place to start. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like you said, you do have the experienced Doty, who I think probably fits the bill as like a SEC backup quality quarterback. And he can play receiver as well. So other names that have already entered, like we said, Mitch Jeter, Landon Sampson, that's the wide receiver who was a redshirt freshman, highly rated, but just really never got it going here at South Carolina. Kylie Horton is another wide receiver. Had some good measurables, but was kind of raw and I guess hadn't developed to the point that he could see a ton of playing time. Felix Hickson, defensive tackle. DeAndre Martin, defensive tackle. Let's
Xavier
see.
Short.
Yeah.
Grayson Maines, who was your backup center and played on kick return this year. He entered the portal about an hour ago.
Omega Blake, Banks, as we mentioned. Kwan Banks, yeah.
And Isaiah Norris, I think, is the other name we haven't said yet.
Yeah. So for the most part, like those situations are kind of mutual in some senses. Like perhaps you could have developed those guys to where by the time they were in their fourth or fifth year, they had some good chances to play pretty consistently or whatever, but that's just not really the reality of most players today. They're wanting to play sooner than later, and you tend to let them develop on another roster, and then when they enter the portal, you go find those guys that are, you know, juniors and seniors or whatever that can take that next step with your program. Kind of sucks from a loyalty standpoint and from like a classic football fan standpoint, I guess, of like seeing these guys develop over the course of 4 or 5 years, stay loyal to your program, and then be a thing. But I do still think you're seeing that some, right? Like Dakarian Joyner is a great example from the past 6 years. Luke Doty, who we already said signed a Garnet Trust deal for next year, so it seems like he's staying, is a good example of that. So those guys do still exist. It's just, yeah, maybe not quite as common as it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think the other takeaway, we were reacting to it live, but just to circle back to it, running back is a thing for the second offseason in a row. You're going to have to find a solution there. I know you have Matthew Fuller in this recruiting class. You're still hoping to land Daniel Hill in this recruiting class. That's two true freshmen. You didn't really give DJ Braswell a lot of run last year. Does Braswell take a jump? You're going to go into the season with Juju as your one. I don't think you're going to do that. A 5'8", 170-pound back in the SEC. Like, I think you're back for the second offseason in a row of needing a portal running back.
Yeah, no doubt that you need at least one. We have heard some positive momentum for Daniel Hill, which I do think he probably can step in and play as a freshman. Matthew Fuller, I think, is an underrated gem that could potentially play as a freshman, but still, you're going to need a veteran presence that can carry the load as well. One thing that I'm really interested to see this portal period, because let me caveat this with, like, this is speculation on my part, informed speculation. How about that? My understanding from an NIL standpoint, and I think this is a somewhat smart move, is unless they are an elite high school prospect, we're not necessarily, whereas in the university or the deals that they're trying to get brokered or whatever, aren't prioritizing these huge deals for high school kids. I think in some ways that made you lose out a couple of close battles over the summer or whatever on these kids that were maybe high 3 stars, low 4 stars, whatever. I think that is so that you can then turn around and have those deals for people that have already proven it at the college level in this portal era. And this is going to be a crucial time to see, you know, if that strategy pays off. Because I do think that the 2024 class that you have is very solid, but the reason it's so small is because you picked and chose like kind of who you wanted, and then you didn't get into bidding wars for those guys that were in the bubble.
Here's another bit of news just now. Just signed with Garnet Trust O'Donnell Fortune, so cross his name off the potential portal leaving. That goes back to what we talked about a second ago with the defense staying intact. That goes back to portal retention. Using your NIL money, your resources you have, especially when, let's face it, you're not Alabama, you're not Georgia, you're not LSU. Especially when you have that. You're using it on guys who are proven, on guys who are staying. And now you look at your cornerback room next year, and your top two, probably OD Fortune and Judge Collier now. You're losing Marcelo Style of the NFL, but you've got two guys who have played a lot of snaps and have played snaps together at different points last season who are projected now as your starting two cornerbacks.
Yeah, I think you feel pretty good about really everyone on defense at this point, except for maybe the edge position. Another portal target that's a little bit pie in the sky, but you can see the connection. The linebacker out of Arkansas, Pooh Thomas. What was his name? I can't think of his last name right
Yeah, he
now.
was an honorable mention All SEC.
Right. Pretty
Like
productive player at Arkansas.
74 tackles, something like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, that could be an interesting pickup at linebacker if you could make something happen there. And then, yeah, you're going to have to find some edge guys, and those guys are very, very hard to come by in the portal. And the few of them that are there and productive there's a lot of competition for them. So that's going to be a tough hole to fill. But for the most part, I think you feel all right about where your defense stands at this moment, at least. Other, I guess, portal targets that we can talk about.
Some offensive line targets for sure. Last few days.
Right. I mentioned the Harvard tight end Tyler Neville. I think he would fill a role, sort of like the Nate Atkins role that didn't really get filled at all last year. I think that there are some guys that could eventually get there, like Nick Elksness and Connor Cox, but they just weren't quite there yet. A couple
Kevin
offensive
Wigginton,
linemen.
Michigan State offensive lineman. You got an offer out for him. He confirmed that yesterday. Fernando Carmona Jr., offensive lineman at San Jose State. He confirmed he got an offer from South Carolina on Monday. So there's two players for your offensive line right there, trying to fill in some depth.
Yeah, and we were talking about D-line and guys that could potentially rush the edge a little bit. Joey Slackman, who is out of UPenn, grad transfer. A lot of people have already given him an offer: Michigan, Washington, Florida, Mizzou, TCU, Colorado, Miami. But yeah, he's got a good size, 6'4", 300. In 2023, he had 115 tackles and 11 sacks, or maybe that's his career. I'm just looking at it real quick, but that's an intriguing name if you could make something happen there. A lot of offensive linemen, like we said. Jamori Macklin is another wide receiver out of North Texas.
Yep.
North Texas, yeah, that'll be interesting. As we mentioned, Jaden McGowan, the Purdue wide receiver Abdur Rahman Yassin. We know that he picked up a target the other day. If you are looking for corner depth, William the Blanket Lee.
Great name.
Yeah, Kansas State. That's pretty good sign if your nickname is the Blanket.
He's had a lot of attention nationally. He had a pretty good year at Kansas State this year, but that's another one. Yeah, for sure. If you could land him, you'd feel even better about your cornerback room, especially with OD back now.
Yeah, I won't spend the whole time just reading off the Insiders Forum thread. Go check that out on GamecockScoop.com. I'll also have any additional visitors other than the ones I mentioned, and I'll have those ones written down too in the weekly recruiting wrap-up tomorrow, and kind of an idea of what the track's looking like for each of those. I mean, I think things are moving in a direction that feel all right, but it's very early, and you're going to be in some pretty intense battles for some of those names that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think this goes back to, I can't remember when he answered the question, but one of the last times we talked to Shane Beamer, I think it was during Clemson week, about the difference between kind of recruiting portal and recruiting high schools. Recruiting high schools, you get 3 or 4 years to build a relationship. Recruiting portals, you get about 3 or 4 days before these kids are making decisions. It moves quick, and you're seeing, he's got the whole list on the Insiders Forum, but the players who are coming into Columbia this weekend weren't even officially in the portal until Monday. That's just how fast it moves in college football nowadays.
Right. And like I said, with the running back, which was Donald Chaney Jr., I saw that as I was looking through the targets. We've already gone through the full cycle with him within, 3 days? So entered the portal, felt like South Carolina had a shot, felt like they've backed off, and that's all happened in the course of 5 days. So a lot of moving pieces. There will probably be some people announced that we don't even necessarily know about. We've been trying to keep up with everything we can on Twitter and through the different channels of hearing who they're targeting, but some of these kids aren't even that active on social media and stuff. So it's gonna be a hectic few weeks for us, and maybe a fun few weeks if you're a fan. Like I said, never a better time to join GamecockScoop.com as a premium subscriber because tons of info on the site right now. Let's transition away from football a little bit towards basketball because who'd have thunk it? Both the men's and women are undefeated at this point in early December. The women kind of had their first couple of tests, I guess. I mean, they've obviously played some teams that were ranked and should have been tested, and then they scored 100 on them or whatever. But they got into two sort of dogfights, I guess, on last week on Tobacco Road. You were there for both against North Carolina and Duke. I don't know if you want to start there and kind of break down what happened in those games, who's stepping forward, and what those sort of gut out performances that we saw in both of them mean for them at this point of the season.
Yeah, I think the first thing is kind of goes back to what we've talked about preseason. This is a young team. I think you saw some of the inexperience Thursday, especially kind of some sloppy play, a little bit of they were down that whole first half at North Carolina. I think I'm trying to think. This offense has struggled at times with getting shots. This team could shoot a lot better. We talked about that before the year. You saw it Sunday at Duke. They shot 60% from three, 9 for 15, I think is what it ended up at. Turning the ball over has been an issue these last two games. I had 20 of them at Duke, and I think it was 15 at North Carolina. That's just product of a young team going too fast for their own good sometimes, what Dawn's talked about. But I think the flip side of that is you're starting to see this group gel a little bit, starting to mesh a little bit. You're seeing some different lineups. Chloe Kitts took a huge step this weekend. I thought she had 2 clutch free throws at North Carolina to seal that game late. They were up 3 with 20 seconds left. She got fouled, hit both. And then Sunday at UNC or at Duke, she gets into a bit of a scrap with a Duke player. It leads to a double tech. She's kind of, I think I said it, public enemy number 1 in Durham there for about an hour. And she responds by scoring her career high. She had 14. South Carolina escapes with a road win there. So you're seeing Chloe Kitts step up. I think you saw growth from Full Wiley too. She got not benched, but played a lot less than usual Thursday because she was struggling defensively, is what Dawn said. Comes back Sunday, plays a lot better. Dawn says she kind of learned that lesson just about defense. I still maintain what I said before the year. This team's going to lose a game, maybe a couple. This is not an infallible roster. They've had struggles with turnovers. The defense isn't as good as last year. But I think that was a learning weekend. That was a growth weekend. And even if it looked ugly for large portions of both games, it's going to help them come March.
I mean, I think it's encouraging to win some ugly games because we saw everything go right in their previous tests. So to see, maybe going through some stretches where the shots weren't falling and where you weren't comfortably ahead by 20 points the entire time or whatever, will serve them well whenever the schedule ratchets up throughout the later part of the season. And then on the men's side, I mean, I don't know of a better like microcosm to bring up than George Washington beating you by 24 points last year. Yep. And then you turning around and beating George Washington by 22 points last week this year. We're just really seeing some consistency out of Michi Johnson and BJ Mack in the sense of at least one of them seems to go off most nights. And in the case of George Washington, they both did. And that's why you won that game by 20 points. And then just getting enough out of your role players, usually getting double digits from either Miles Stute or Talon Cooper. Zach Davis has, knocked down some quality shots. Even the freshman getting a little bit involved. Colin Murray Boyles played in his first action, got some points. Ugasuk had a 3 as well. The team just seems a lot more balanced this year compared to last year.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what you're seeing too, is we talked about multiple different ways to win coming out of the Arizona tournament where, you didn't play as well offensively in one game, then another game you did shoot the ball well. You can do the kind of post-up bully ball thing with BJ Mack. You've got some pace you can shoot with. Lamont's talked about just versatility with this team and kind of you don't have to rely on one thing. This team is going to shoot the 3, and shooting the 3 is going to ultimately probably be what makes or breaks this team in conference play. But there are other ways to get offense. There's other ways to move the ball. And I think if you're a South Carolina fan right now, just kind of enjoy it. You're playing in, when was the last time there was a men's basketball game as big as the one in 7 hours in Clemson, with both teams undefeated? Clemson got ranked this week. South Carolina got 9 points in the poll. It's a huge game tonight. And, obviously if you win tonight, that changes the conversation considerably. You're talking about being ranked. You're starting to use the tournament a little bit. Like, even if you lost tonight, you go in there, a hostile environment, you show something, I think you still probably feel way better than you did a month ago.
Yeah, it's definitely notable that Brad Brownell was able to keep PJ Hall around. That's almost as big as the signings that they did get this offseason in the portal. And then you got a transfer out of Syracuse, Joseph Girard, who's second on the team in scoring right now with 14.7 points per game. And he's been pretty efficient from three. This is a team that can score with you, which has been something that South Carolina hasn't faced a ton this year. Whenever they're hot, they tend to be able to keep a pretty safe distance on teams, even if they're not playing, shutout defense or whatever. If you give Clemson open shots, they're going to make them tonight, and so that's going to be. It should be a fun game. I'm expecting a lot of fireworks on both sides, honestly, as long as both teams kind of play to their potential. Yeah.
Track meet, both teams can shoot, both teams can score, both teams have multiple ways to score. And I think sitting right here, right now, you're thinking about scoring 80 points tonight to have a chance to win. I think. I don't think you're holding Clemson, into the 60s or something like that. You're gonna have to score a lot to win tonight, and I think this team's capable of doing that.
Yeah, and just to put some numbers to like the balance that I was talking about a second ago, Michi Johnson leads the team in scoring and rebounding, which I don't know if people would have thought that coming. Yeah, but he's averaging 17.9 points per game, 5.0 rebounds per game. Mack and Stute are both averaging double-digit scoring, with Mack a little bit higher, and then Talon Cooper has been all right as a scorer himself, pretty efficient, and he's also averaging that 5.6 assists per game, which we talked about a few weeks ago is kind of the thing that's making the whole thing run. Is they're just doing a good job of finding open shots. They're doing a really good job of spreading the ball around, and then they really don't take that many shots per game, which is why their efficiency is so high. And they're not necessarily scoring 100 points per game or anything. They're scoring college basketball sort of scores, but when they have the open shots, they're making them and they're taking them.
What I guess my question would be, obviously, it always sucks if you lose to Clemson. What would you a win tonight? I think goes without saying. You're 8-0. You're going to be right next week. You're talking about the tournament. Like you're having all those conversations. What would you need to see in a loss tonight to still feel like this is kind of on track? Because I think that you don't even have to talk about the win side of the coin. You already know. You already know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a competitive game in a tough road environment looks pretty good. Don't get blown out. And I think showing the ability to ugly it up a little bit for Clemson, and not just, I don't know, losing 80-65 or something like that.
Right.
I think no matter what happens tonight, the bar has been raised for expectations at this point, and you've got some good wins in the non-con, even though it has been pretty easy, but Clemson's has been pretty easy as well. I don't know if you're ready to start talking tournament yet, although in the net ratings that came out this week, they would have been projected as like a 6 seed. So, but obviously it's December right now.
The other thing about net, though, if we're talking postseason, is they're 4th in the SEC in net right now. The top 2 in net in the SEC who don't make the tournament get automatic NIT invitations. So obviously it's December, is a long way to go. But if you finish 9th in net in the SEC and the top 7 make the tournament, well, you get an automatic NIT bid or invitation at that point.
I think that tonight really is a crux game. If you win tonight, you start 8-0, which ties the 2016-17 record for a start to the season. And you will have beat a ranked team. You will beat your rival, beat an ACC school, Power 5 school, all those. 2 of those at this point, if you count the Notre Dame win as well.
3, Virginia Tech.
You're right. Yeah. So at that point, I think if you win tonight, you do start flirting with the idea of tournament and start thinking about how many conference wins you need to get there and all those sorts of things. If you don't, you kind of reset a little bit and you're like, okay, this team is definitely better than last year. but kind of what is their ceiling? And I think a lot of that will depend on just how badly you do get beat or how competitive this game looks.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, we're probably not going to record between now and then, but Saturday is kind of after Clemson is kind of it's your last road game in non-con. It's your last kind of test. You're playing East Carolina, the team that beat you pretty badly last year. It's kind of similar to Georgia Washington. You're going out to their place. If you can, even if you lost to Clemson, if you responded and you beat East Carolina, split the week, split the first two true road games of the year, I think you're still feeling okay about this coming into finals week where you get a week off to reset, and then your last 4 non-con games that are all at home.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, those of you that want to keep up with the double slate tonight, I will be doing some coverage on GamecockScoop.com of South Carolina versus Morgan State on the women's side at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can join me to
watch a 60-point game.
I would say I've already started writing the game story on that one. It's going to be like 130 or so. So yeah, if you want to, see if my prediction comes to pass, I'll be there, and you can hang out there pregame. And then the Clemson South Carolina game starts at 8 Eastern. It's on ACC Network, and Alan will have live coverage from Littlejohn and some postgame coverage on that one. So really fun night to hopefully see both of these basketball teams keep their undefeated streak going to start the season.
If you're exhausted by the portal, if you want to break before all the official visits this weekend, this is a good little double dip palate cleanser for you tonight. 2 basketball games.
Yeah, and obviously the men's game is one that matters very much in the race to see which major programs can win the rivalry. What's that thing called? Is it President's Cup or
Palmetto Cup, which is tied? I think it's 2-2-1 right now because let's see, South Carolina won in women's basketball and volleyball. Clemson won obviously in football, and men's soccer and women's soccer was a tie. So yeah, it's 2-2-1 right now, going for the lead tonight.
There you go. And it would be pretty impactful in a bunch of ways. So keep up with all the portal stuff on GamecockScoop.com. I will have a little bit of a summation of that in the weekly recruiting wrap up tomorrow. And come join us and hang out for the game threads tonight. Until next time, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you.